To learn more about earning college credits with study hall courses, go to gostudyhall.com or click the link in the description. Maybe you've heard the saying, "In this world, nothing is certain except death and taxes," or the ever-positive view that life sucks and then you die. Or maybe you're more of an Emily Dickinson fan. "Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me." The point is, death is inevitable. And even if you didn't grow up in a funeral home like me, chances are you're also going to live through the death of someone else. And many people have no idea how to handle loss or how to talk to other people experiencing loss. So psychology gives us some tools and language for defining, understanding, and coping with loss. Because even though we all experience it, we don't all experience it in the same way. Hi, I'm Deja Fitzgerald, and we are gathered here today for Study Hall Intro to Psychology. When we experience the death of a loved one, it can have a profound impact on, well, everything. It can affect how we feel, how we view the person who died, how we view ourselves, and how we view everyone around us who keeps shoving casserole dishes into our hands. And when we talk about how we're feeling and acting, we might say we're grieving or mourning or even bereaved. We tend to use those words interchangeably, but in psychology, they all refer to different things. Bereavement broadly refers to the period of time after a loss. Meanwhile, grief refers more specifically to the emotional response to a loss. And mourning is the way we publicly show our grief. And there are lots of different things that impact how we experience bereavement. For example, a person's culture can dictate how they're expected to mourn and what they do during bereavement. This includes cultural, spiritual, or personal rituals, customs, and gatherings to mourn and honor the lost life. So things like wakes, leaving flowers at the graveside, or whether you want Elton John or bagpipes played at your burial. But grief and mourning don't end when the burial does, and some cultural practices also acknowledge this fact. Like in Judaism, there are specific guidelines for how family members should act in the week, month, and year following a loss. Close family members sit Shiva for 7 days after the burial, and some mourners may say a special prayer for a full year after the death. And families of Mexican heritage may observe Dia de los Muertos each year by creating altars or decorating graves to remember those they've lost. These practices help to show that grief is a long and complex process. And within this process, psychologists have observed and described a variety of patterns. These patterns can help people walk through grief and understand that grief can look a lot of different ways, even for people within the same family or a close group of friends. For example, let's look at Amina and her dad, Rashid. Amina's older brother, Salim, died suddenly in a car accident, leaving the family reeling from the unexpected loss. For the first week, Amina is in shock. She hardly eats and she has trouble sleeping, but she doesn't want to leave her bed either. Rashid, on the other hand, jumps into action. He hardly stops moving as he hosts the family members who visit and coordinates the details of Salim's memorial. Amina wishes her dad would just stop and allow himself to be sad. But Rashid thinks Amina should do something to distract herself and calm her emotions. Amina and Rashid are both reacting to their loss in typical and understandable ways. Psychologists refer to this period of intense emotions following a loss as acute grief. As time passes, Amina and Rashid's grief will likely turn into integrated grief. This type of grief is less intense and debilitating than acute grief. Amina and Rashid will still feel sadness and think of Salim often, but Amina will eventually begin to be able to eat and sleep regularly again, and Rashid will be able to slow down and go about his typical daily routines. For some people, grief doesn't follow this pattern. And if symptoms such as intense loneliness, emotional numbness, or difficulty participating in daily life persist for a year after the loss, or longer than is expected by social or cultural norms, psychologists may diagnose prolonged grief disorder. But some people don't like this diagnosis. They think that the grieving process may naturally be extra long and difficult for some people, and putting time limits on grief may make it even more challenging for people to cope with their loss. There are also a few other ways that grief can fall outside of expected patterns, like a person may deeply grieve the loss of a beloved pet who was a close companion for years. Someone may grieve when a friend receives an unexpected medical diagnosis, or when their parents sell their childhood home. And while these kinds of losses are becoming more widely recognized by society, they are not always treated with the same empathy as the loss of human life. So when a person feels loss in a way that is different from what society expects, it's known as disenfranchised grief, or a person may experience suffocated grief. That's when someone's grief response is misunderstood or even punished, leaving people to feel that they can't fully express their grief. For example, some companies have bereavement policies that offer different amounts of leave for different types of relationships, like 3 days if a grandparent dies, 1 day if a niece dies, and no time at all if a close friend dies. And that can signal that people are expected to quickly move on from a loss, or that certain kinds of relationships should be grieved more than others, even though for many people, blood is not thicker than water. These are just a few of the ways psychologists categorize grief, and none of them are necessarily right or wrong. There's just lots of different ways for people to be people. And just like there are lots of different types of grief, there are lots of different patterns in the ways people grieve. Based on these patterns, psychologists also describe several models of grief. One of the earliest theories about grief was developed by everyone's favorite psychologist, Sigmund Freud. In his view, known as Trauerarbeit, or grief work, a person cannot heal unless they face their grief, and they need to reduce their emotional connection to the person who died. This approach may work for some people, but that's definitely not the only way to grieve. There's also the well-known but often misunderstood Kubler-Ross stages of grief model. It was originally developed to help people process their own death, and the model says that there are 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. The Kubler-Ross model is often described in a linear way, so it can make people feel like there's one right way to grieve. But it's much more likely that a person will cycle between stages many times, and they may never reach acceptance. So it's more helpful to see these stages as loose categories that can help us interpret and understand grief symptoms. And there are also several other helpful ways to look at grief. Rubin's 2-track model of bereavement says that there are 2 different tracks, or views, of how grief affects people. The first has to do with biopsychosocial functioning, or the way a person cares for their body and mind and connects with others after a loss. After her brother died, Amina felt intense sadness, couldn't sleep, and struggled to be with other people. But over time, her body and mind became better able to handle the shock of grief, and she's able to function in a more typical way. The second track is about a person's relationship with their loss. At first, Amina avoids thinking of her brother if the memories are too painful, but over time, she begins to think of her brother fondly and carve out special times, such as his birthday, to intentionally remember him. Another model of grief takes a more non-linear view. Strobe's dual process model of coping with bereavement emphasizes oscillation, or going back and forth between focusing on the loss and avoiding the loss by focusing on other things. Think of an oscillating fan swinging back and forth, or sometimes the air is blowing right at you, and sometimes it's pointing another way. This model says that it's important to spend time thinking about loss and working through grief, but it's equally important to take breaks from that work. This model gives space so that people don't need to feel overwhelmed or guilty about their feelings or the way they process their grief. So for Amina, it's healthy to spend time thinking about her brother, looking through old photos, and mourning the idea that she'll never hear his dumb jokes again. But it's also healthy to spend time with her friends or mindlessly watch The Bachelor for a few hours. Oscillating between those 2 kinds of activity helps Amina process her grief and find ways to cope and move forward. So yes, watching reality TV can be healthy. Kind of. Grieving can be a long and complicated process, but there is some light at the end of the tunnel. Wait, maybe don't go towards that light. Psychological research has shown that most people can heal and move forward on their own over time, especially if they have support and healthy ways to cope. The process of grieving can even help people find new meaning and purpose in their lives. And there are many strategies and techniques people can use to process and learn to cope with grief. Amina finds it helpful to keep a journal with memories about her brother. When her emotions become particularly intense, she uses mindfulness practices to identify what she is feeling and calm herself down. Rashid finds it helpful to attend a support group for other parents who have lost children. Eventually, he keeps just 1 or 2 strong friendships from that group for continued conversation and support. It also helps Rashid to take care of his physical health, so he changes his eating habits and takes up jogging to help regulate his body and emotions. With these strategies, Amina and Rashid are able to understand their emotions and grieving processes. They have support for the times when they are struggling, and they have healthy strategies for managing their pain. Navigating grief doesn't bring a person back where they started. They may never feel like the same person they were before the loss, but that's okay. Instead, grieving and understanding grief equips us with tools for when sadness and pain arise again. It's a way to learn, grow, and progress in life. And even though everyone experiences grief differently, everyone does experience grief. So having a better understanding of grief can help us all better support each other and ourselves as we learn to cope and keep moving forward. And it can help us come up with more and better ways to guide each other through grief and bereavement. So we have more to offer than a 9x13 full of lasagna. If you're enjoying Study Hall, Intro to Psychology, and are interested in taking an online course and earning college credit, go to GoStudyHall.com or click this button to learn more. Thanks for watching. See you next time.